Yo guys, Ponchy here, and today we're going to learn how to use trig conditions on our Octatrack MK2. Let's go. Alright guys, so I have a bass line and a beat pulled up here. This is what it sounds like. And I want to use some trig conditions to change up the way the hi-hat sounds right now, because on the timeline here I just have a hi-hat on every single step. So we can use trig conditions to change it up a little bit so it sounds not so bland. But first, let me show you how to get to the trig conditions, and then we'll go over each one of them individually. So, and also, if you've seen one of my other videos about Elektron trig conditions, then you'll be ahead of the curve. But it is a little different on the Octatrack, so here we go. So the way to get to it is you hold down a trig, and then you press either left or right to get to the micro timing menu, which is where you can choose whether you want the trig to be right on the grid or if you want it to be a little before or ahead. That's for another video if you guys want, but this is how you get to the trig conditions. So as you can see, it says trig conditions right there. It says LEV in parentheses, which means you use the level knob to control which condition you want. So I'm gonna have to hold this trig down and we'll cycle through them one by one. So if you go immediately right, first one you have is fill and no fill. So the interesting thing about fill is that if a trig has a fill condition on it, then those trigs will only play when you use the fill function on the Octatrack, which fill just refers to as if you were playing drums. So if you're a drummer, you know that a fill is just like a part in between your beat. So that's basically what a fill is. So the way to activate the fill, first off, I'm going to add fill conditions to all four of these trigs. And yes, you can hold all four of them down. Press left or right to get to the micro timing menu. Go to level, and then make sure they all have fill as the condition. And not the one with the line over it. I'll talk about that in a sec, but as long as it has the fill condition, you can come back here, go to the micro timing menu, and if you hold all of them down, you'll see that they have the fill condition. So anyway, let's play the beat. You can clearly hear that the hi-hat stops for the first four trigs right here. So there's a couple different ways to use the fill condition. If you hold down and then press page, you'll notice that even though this is only a one page pattern or a one bar pattern, however you want to look at it, you'll notice that all four of these lights over here, the page lights, have lit up. So that means that fill is armed for the next time around, and then once the pattern plays once, the fill will turn back off. So of course when it's activated, those trigs will play, and then when the fill is done, after one pattern, one repetition, they will turn off. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So these, when I press play, these will play immediately, and then the next time around they won't play at all. And that's evidenced by the fact that all four of the page lights turned off. So the other way to use it is you can press both the up and down arrow, or hold it I should say, same with the previous one, but hold the two up and down arrows and then press page, and again you'll see that they light up. But this one makes it so the fill activates every single time that the pattern plays. So let's listen. So you can hear that every single time those first 4 hi-hats are playing, because the fill mode is locked to the on position basically. And then the way to unlock it, to disable that, is to hold the up arrow, press page, bam, goes right back to the way it was. So now I won't spend too much time talking about the ones with the line over them, because basically the way to look at that, I'm going to reset these trigs here just by removing them and adding them back. But if you go back to our trig conditions, you see the one with the line over it, fill with the line over it. That means that it's the complete opposite of the other one. So in this case, all the trigs that have fill on them will play every single time, and then when you activate the fill mode, they will not play. So again, the exact opposite of the other one. So I won't spend too much time talking about that. If you want more info, you can check out my other trig condition videos. But for now, just know it's the opposite. So the next one is pre. The way to use this one is if the trig before it is activated, then this one will also play. So the way to use that is with the percentage, the probabilities that we'll talk about in a little bit. For now, mute the hi-hat and the bass line just for the sake of demonstration. So let's go ahead and put a trig condition on this one. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the percentage probability trigs. So if you keep turning the knob more to the right, you'll start to see percentages, and those basically mean that every single time that trig comes around, it will basically roll the dice, trig 50% of the time. So that's basically what that means. So then pre, so number 6 here, trig number 6 has 50% probability on it. Then if we go to trig 9, we can do the pre one. So if number 6 trigs, then so will number 9. But if number 6 does not trig, number 9 won't either. So you can hear it, with this particular beat, it creates a really interesting variation, because rather than have both of these on 50%, you're basically tying them together in a way that they will trig together or they won't trig together. So that's what's really handy about that one, because if you set them both to 50%, there would be instances where one of them would trig and the other one wouldn't, and then vice versa. So this kind of ensures that when that first one trigs, the second one will always trig. So that's how you use the pre one. Definitely super interesting. And again, if you use the pre with a line over it, then it will be the complete opposite of what we just did. So in this case, if number 6 trigs, number 9 won't. And then if number 6 doesn't trig, number 9 will. So that's the way to look at that. You can definitely create some really interesting stuff with trig conditions. So on to the next. I'm going to reset these. Okay, so after pre, we have NEI, which essentially stands for neighbor. So the way to look at it is kind of like the pre-condition, except instead of looking at the trig before it, it's going to look at the same step on the next track over. So the way to use that is, let's get the hi-hat back in here. So I'm going to go ahead and assign all of these a 50% chance to trig. So now all those trigs on the bass and snare track are set to 50%. So if we come over here to our hi-hat track and we set all of them to neighbor, now every trig on the hi-hat track is set to neighbor. So the majority of them are only going to trig when the other ones on the first track trig. So hope that one's not too confusing, but again, the best way to look at it is exactly like the pre one, but instead of looking at the one before it, it looks at the trigs on the track next to it. So now the next trig condition that we have is first. So if a trig is set to first, that means that it will play the first time around, and then after that it won't play at all. So if you want, a good use for this is to trigger a sample on the same track as another sample, and that way it would be more of like an intro kind of thing, to where it's basically a really good way of creating intros without having to use a part or use like a totally different track or another pattern, for example. The first trig condition is a good way of getting more real estate out of your patterns, so you don't have to change things up too much. So what we can do here, let's use our hi-hat example again. I'm going to change all 4 of the first 4 trigs set to first. So that means that they will play the first time, and then after that they will never play again. So here we go. So there you have it. They will never play again unless you press stop and press play. So you basically restart the pattern. So, all right, and again, the next one is first with the line over it. So that means they won't play the first time, and then every time after that they will play. So this one is a little bit better for creating intros, because we could set it, let's go ahead and set all the hi-hat trigs to first with the line over it. All these hi-hats, they will not play in the first time around, and then after that they will. So this is a good way of looking at making an intro, because, for example, in this example, we're not going to have our hi-hats play the first pattern through, and then after that the hi-hats will come in. So it's kind of a build-up kind of thing with your beat. So let's listen to what that sounds like. Cool. And there you have it. That one, I really like that one. That one's super useful, but that's why there's so many different trig conditions, because they're only useful in very specific situations, and but it certainly increases the possibility of what can be done on the Elektron machines, because all of these machines have these trig conditions, so it's supremely useful. So the next trig condition is the percentages that we talked about earlier. Those are self-explanatory. They trigger based on the percentage. So that one's probably my favorite for getting as much real estate as I can out of one pattern or one page, or looking at it in more of a minimalist way. In this example, a good way to use the trig conditions, or the percentages, the probabilities, is to set some of them to a probability 41%, you know, and I'm just choosing ones at random here. So, you know, let's do 33% for those. So if we play it now, you get a much more broken up hi-hat pattern, but it's doing all the legwork for you. You don't have to, you know, be removing trigs on the fly or doing things like that, so you can concentrate on other things. So after the percentages, we have these ratio looking ones. Now they start all the way from 1 to 2, and they go all the way to 8 to 8. So the way that these work is the first one tells you which repetition it'll trigger on, and then the second one tells you how many repetitions it'll take before it gets back to that one, in a way. That's not the best explanation for it, but I'll just show you what I mean. If it's 2 of 4, let's change it to 2 of 4. I just want to drive the point home on this one. So with 2 of 4, it's going to trigger the second time around. So the first time it won't, second time it will, third time it won't, fourth time it won't. Come back around to the first time it will not trigger, and then the second time it'll trig again. So, you know, kind of one way to look at it is every 4 times it's going to trig for sure. But it depends on what that first number is when it's going to trig. So let's listen. As soon as I hit play, they're not going to trig, but then the second time around they will. There's the second, third, fourth. Back to the first, second, they do trig, and then it just repeats that cycle over and over. So that's probably the hardest one to wrap your head around at first, but that's another super useful one. It's a really good way of doing, like if you do 4 to 4, then whatever trigs you set to 4 of 4, they will always trig at the end. So it's kind of a good way to ensure that they trig at a certain time, but not most of the rest of the time. So that's that. Hope those trig conditions help you guys. It's a super helpful way to change up your patterns and everything without having to do a lot of the work yourself, you know, with trigs and stuff. So it's super helpful for on the fly things. So thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I am making a course right now that will come out soon. I'm making ones on the Analog 4 and the Analog Rytm for now. Haven't decided which one will come out first, but they will be out. One of them will be out soon, and they will be available through my website. But just letting you guys know, those are kind of more in-depth courses. If you're looking for more of an in-depth thing from me, then those courses will be kind of a complete reference from start to finish as far as creating a song. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.